Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Kate Hewlett, an actor, writer, and producer you might know from her appearances on everything from Stargate Atlantis and multiple Degrassi series to The Girlfriend Experience, Murdoch Mysteries, and The Parker Andersons. She also wrote the 2008 stage musical The Swearing Jar, about a young mother staging a concert for the father of her child, and subsequently adapted that, with director Lindsay Mackay, into a feature film starring Adelaide Clements, Douglas Booth, and Patrick J. Adams. After premiering at TIFF last month, The Swearing Jar is now available on VOD in the US, and it's set to open theatrically in Toronto and Vancouver on November 2nd and 9th, respectively. Kate picked Lost in Translation, Sofia Coppola's 2003 follow-up to The Virgin Suicides, starring Scarlett Johansson and Bill Murray as a listless young woman and a fading movie star who form an unexpected but profound connection while staying at the same Tokyo hotel. More about mood than story, the film was an instant favorite with critics, leading to an awards season run that culminated in Oscar nominations for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay, with Coppola winning the Screenplay Prize. Pretty good for a second feature. This is Someone Else's Movie.
There are a few movies that just stay with you for your whole life, right? There are those movies that you think are perfect. And it's one of those films for me. It's just, there may be two or three tiny moments where it hasn't aged well. But other than that, I thought it actually did age quite well. And I thought that it's just the most incredible use of dialogue, right? Because there's so little of it. And I think that is the opposite of what I do. And I admire that so much, to trust your vision, to trust your actors, to trust the film, your vision of the film, I guess, that you don't need all those words. So I just thought it was one of the most beautiful things ever.
And you would have seen it in its original release. Did you catch it theatrically or catch up to it later?
Well, this is the crazy thing. So I saw it in the movie theaters when I was around Scarlett Johansson's age.
Okay.
And now her character. And now I'm closer to Bill Murray's age in the film. And that was a wild experience. It was really incredible, actually. And it was not something I would have expected.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to process that. I'm doing the math in my head. It's like, well, it's almost 20 years now, right? I mean, it was 2003. Yeah. And so I would have been, between them anyway, I would have been 35.
Okay.
So
you look 35 now.
Thank you. You're very kind.
That's confusing.
I've been cycling.
I have not. You look very young.
Thank you. I have a high voice. That's the other thing. People think I'm younger than I am. I'm high for a man anyway. So I'm told.
Sound more youthful.
Youthful and more vulnerable is how I've heard it described back to me. I swear to God, interviewing directors over the decades has been a real education in the way I see myself. But yeah, so I was right between the two. I was neither old enough to sympathize with Bill Murray, nor was I young and beautiful enough to sympathize with Scarlett Johansson. This is not self-deprecating. Nobody was at that time, really. Yeah. Like it's kind of remarkable how the film captures her at this point where she's, as an actor, she's already in control of her image, and she's confident in a way that lets her play innocent and naive in interesting ways. Like she's always reflecting back on herself. She's a prism.
Yes.
And then she's 5 years away from the Marvel people starting to come courting, and the whole course of her career changing. But right now she's sort of this art house jewel, this fixture. And
she had done The Horse Whisperer.
That's right.
You remember that? That's where
like 97, 98.
I don't remember what year it was, but I was not a fan of her performance.
Okay.
I was not a fan. And I thought, oh, that she's not going to have much of a career. And then and then I remember seeing Lost in Translation and being like, she may be one of the finest actors out there, and she's very young.
It's fascinating because Ghost World is in between those two, which is the one for me where she really comes together.
She was great in Ghost World.
Yeah. And again, she's playing someone who is acutely aware of how people perceive her. And chooses a different path than Enid does, than the hero does, and sort of gets rejected by the film as a result. Like, she's perceived as the sellout for the second act of the picture, but that's, I think, just Terry Zwigoff's worldview.
Revisit that movie. I saw that a really long time ago.
It makes sense if you see it as a movie made by the Steve Buscemi character, in a way, like his worldview is being reflected through the prism, but it's also refusing to let Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson be caricatures. They both get to be whole people.
Right.
And then she does this, and it's like, oh, it's not just a thing of like somebody capturing her in that moment. This is her version of an aesthetic. This is what she wants to do as an actor, is to just exist on camera with interesting people.
She needed to be in the right kind of movie. And I think The Horse Whisperer was completely the wrong kind of movie, right? It just, she lives so well in that indie space. And I don't know, there's just, it was absolutely incredible, her performance in this movie. And even more so the second time, I think. She just has this endlessly watchable quality. And it's nothing to do, I mean, it doesn't hurt that she's stunningly beautiful, but it's not that really. Yeah. She's so interesting. She looks like she's thinking about a million things, and she's I mean, to go up against Bill Murray and hold your own, honestly.
Yeah, it is something. But then I realized too, watching it again, that Bill Murray is allowing us to be fascinated by her because that's what he's giving out in his performance. Like, he's just interested in her as a scene partner. He's completely engaged. He's giving it back, and he's doing it through this facade of disconnection where neither of them is fully invested in anything in the world except each other, which is what becomes so fascinating, that they're creating this connection just by seeing each other.
It's so fascinating. And it just elicits so many responses from me. Like, it captures certain feelings in a way that I don't know. I just thought it was remarkable. You know, that the feeling of connecting with someone you hardly know instantly, and whatever that is, if it's banter, if it's a shared experience, if I don't know, but that happens now and then. You know, it happens with women and happens with men. You meet someone and you're like, oh, there you are, and then they're gone again. And it just captured that. And I thought so many other things too, coming back to it now. The character of the wife, who exists mostly through notes, faxes, and phone calls where you can't actually hear what she's saying, but you know exactly who she is. I thought that was brilliant as well, you know, and to trust, as a filmmaker, to trust that will be interesting and clear was extraordinary too.
Yeah, so much of it is about the two completely distinct spheres, like their personal lives just existing off camera, off the edge of the screen. Like Giovanni Ribisi drifting in and out for Charlotte. I keep forgetting her name, her character's name, because it's just so much Scarlett Johansson. It even sounds like Scarlett. Mm-hmm. And I know that supposedly, anyway, Coppola didn't have anyone in mind when she wrote it. She was just writing about herself originally, and then found Johansson and said, "Oh no, this is perfect. I don't need to write anything further. I don't need any more backstory than I've already put on the page, because she'll just embody it all," which is really interesting and completely not what I thought. It feels so much in both cases, in both Johansson and Murray, that it was written specifically for them.
Yes, it does.
And
was it not written for Bill Murray?
I think it was.
Okay.
And maybe that's why I got the sense that it was also written for Johansson. But you could probably plug in someone else of a similar age, and as long as he's willing to go with the vibe of the film, it would work, right? Because so much of it is in the language of the film, is in the cinematography and the aesthetic and the vibe that Coppola and her collaborators are creating. So I'm sure Saturday Night Live did this as a parody. If you organized this with Scarlett Johansson's footage and a mannequin, that it would still play as haunting and moving, just because the expectation is created by the film itself. But Murray is, again, just at that moment in his career where it could have gone either way. You know, it's 5 years after Rushmore, a couple of years after the Royal Tenenbaums. His melancholy is kicking in, but we still expect him to be funny.
Yes.
And because he doesn't do that here, because Bob Harris isn't Bill Murray, he's playing someone who's had a completely different career. It just disconnects us a tiny little bit in the audience and makes us work a little harder to see who this guy is, which I found fascinating. I think he's supposed to be like a Warren Beatty-alike, someone who's had that career.
Or Bruce Willis.
You think so?
I did, because there was a lot of action talk.
Oh, that's true. They talk about the action movies,
stunts, right? And this kind of thing.
Yeah, I just assumed he was playing along in those scenes. It's funny because you're right. That is part of it, but I've never taken it seriously because Bill Murray's just not that guy.
Right. He doesn't seem proud of his career.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I didn't think of Warren Beatty, because he seems sort of ashamed of all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Willis and Murray sort of came up around the same, or they broke out around the same time. They're almost contemporaries, even though that sounds really weird when I say it out loud.
Yes.
Murray's always been an old soul kind of guy. Like even in Ghostbusters, he's the cranky spectator.
Yes, but I can't imagine him actually seeming young.
Yeah, but he was. I mean, he was reasonably young. Saturday Night Live was, what, 6-7 years behind that? I'm doing all the math in my head now, and it's just making me very tired. But it's this great legacy of work from him where, you know, everybody writes off the 90s for some weird reason when he did some of his best work in it, just on either end of it, just doing his own stuff. But he's always had this sort of cracked integrity where he only works with people he wants to work with. And when he's doing favors for friends, you can always tell because there's a generosity to the performance, like Little Shop of Horrors and stuff like that, where he just shows up and you're happy to see him. And now he's this person. And yeah, I think it was John Harkness back at the time. I know we saw it together. And he said that we are supposed to believe that Bill Murray is unhappy. And somehow it works, because that's not something you think of when you look at his films. You don't see an unhappy person pretending to be happy. You see someone who's just inhabiting whatever this thing is that this character that he's playing. And then gradually filmmakers, and this was John's point, they started to realize around the time of Rushmore that you can make him look sad if he just stands still. Like there's something to him that comes out.
Sad clown.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
that's so easy, right? Like that's just such an easy way for him to play it, and that's not what Bill Murray is doing. No. Right? He may be here a little bit in his scenes with the press, in his scenes with reporters where he so doesn't want to be there. But then you get him doing everything else that he does in this film, and it's wistful and interesting and rich with character, even when he's just waiting for someone to take his picture. There's all this stuff that's happening behind his eyes, and I don't think I'd ever seen it before. Not from him anyway.
No, it was, I think it's definitely my favorite performance of his ever. I just thought there was so much, again, going on in his eyes. And I think they're very much, I don't think the movie would have been what it was without either of them, honestly. I thought, because he does bring a certain lightness to it, even though he is very sad, and you can see that he's lived a life that wasn't quite what he expected or hoped for, but he's finding his joy again in this, or he's trying to. And so there's a sense of play and all of that as well. Yeah. And he never feels like he's doing a comedy.
No, it's true. He's playing the drama of it, or at least he's playing the reality of it.
Honesty, yeah.
Yeah. And what we get is the pleasure of his company. Like we just get to watch Bill Murray be alive on screen in a way that he usually isn't. And even though so much of the film is intentionally hermetic, like it's sort of compressing them into spaces where there's not a lot of room, there's not a lot of air, you just start to understand how much it's appreciated that they have these little quiet moments together where no one else can bother them and where no one punctures their little cocoon. And yeah, it's like vacation friends, right? Like you run into somebody that you've never met before, you spend 48 hours with them and you never see them again. And it's transformative partially because it can be really interesting to spend time with someone you don't know because you get to reinvent yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But also there's the weird flattery of being seen, which I'm sure is what Charlotte responds to as much as Bob does. Like they're both delighted that they can be this version of themselves that they think they are all the time, but that someone else will actually recognize it and that they can connect that way.
That's what I noticed about it this time, was that it's not even about connecting. It's not just about connecting with another person. It's about your best version of yourself and someone finding you hilarious or getting all your looks, or there's something about that, right? That just feeds your ego and your soul, that when you meet someone and they think you are what you want to be.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's the feedback thing too, right? Where you actually can try something and see what it does. Like this moment where, I mean, that wonderful, it's the karaoke scene, right? Like, I don't know that he picks that song if he's singing it to someone else. And the freedom that he has emotionally to do that, because there's no judgment and nobody else. It's the the Bill Murray stories, right? That everybody says there are all these legends of him just walking up to people and stealing one of their French fries and saying, "No one will ever believe you," which I think is.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Someone's actually made a documentary about that. Of course they have. And the idea that he's this larger than life imp who just wanders around bothering people, but nobody cares because it's Bill Murray and it's just fun. That's come post Lost in Translation more than anything else, I think, because people want to have Bob Harris. They want to see this version of Bill Murray, who is incredibly soulful and knows what to say and knows how to handle people and isn't annoyed that you're bothering him when he's on vacation. You know, all these this perfect way of meeting a celebrity. And in a weird way, it comes back in somewhere in Coppola's other film about celebrity and the weird interaction between really, really famous people and the world around them. And you're reminded, oh, of course, she's Sofia Coppola. She grew up surrounded by famous relatives, famous friends.
Yes.
She doesn't think twice about it. And yeah, you probably have had a karaoke night with Bill Murray that went a lot like this. But rather than make the movie that The Virgin Suicides was, that Somewhere kind of is, which is that, oh, look at me, I have all this and I'm not happy. She's doing it from the perspective of someone who is desperately trying to be happy.
Yes.
And doesn't know why she isn't. And that's the thing that I find so compelling, because that's what Bob Harris is living and that's what Charlotte is living. And the movie doesn't have an answer, right? Like the thesis statement is not that the friends of famous people should be friends with famous people. Like, that's not where this thing is going.
No, it's true. And I think it's just, there is hope to this one. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful. They both have hope. I think that they will find more than what they have right now. And they believe in the other person too.
Yeah. Each of them is the catharsis that the other needs, I think. Yes. But without making it sexual and without making it gross. It's not about codependency. It's just about connection. Yeah. And like, there's a gross version of this movie and there are dozens of them, and Woody Allen has made about 7 of them. But but
I wonder why.
Yeah, it's just so unsettling. Looking back now, it's like, oh, that one too. Oh yeah. That was a subplot there. But to see this and realize, like, this is, and I think it had to be made by someone who has been in that situation herself, like a young woman who was an actor and for a little while, and that didn't work and she had to find something else. And to be able to recapture that sense of uncertainty in your own life, and then to also extend that generosity to Bob, right? It's not just about her, it's about the two of them. And it's so even-handed, way more so than I remember. When I had this vague memory of spending way more time with Charlotte, and it turns out it's 60-40, really.
See, I thought that's very interesting, because I thought it was much more Bill Murray. My memory of it was that it was almost all Bill Murray. Huh. Maybe that's just, we needed that person more than the other person.
Yeah, that's where we were when we saw it. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and it is very even. So that was a surprise to me. I had a different take on Bob's response to fans as well, because I actually thought he was pissed off. I thought he was kind of an asshole sometimes. He was on his best behavior with her. Mm-hmm. But I did think he didn't appreciate people coming up to him and saying, it depends. I guess he didn't like it when he was sort of, there was an element of like circus freak. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there was an element of people pointing and talking about him and then coming over, and I don't know, I don't know, there was some, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah, the fishbowl thing where he's just constantly existing in people's worlds where people are always aware of him. I mean, just that he's great with her, that he's with her, he's not doing any of that stuff. Like he'll turn it on when he has to get people to leave him alone. But when Bob is with Charlotte, you just get the sense that he's letting himself be instead of being on his guard.
I also don't think she knew who he was, though.
Think so?
Yeah.
I mean, she's married to a director.
But they met in the elevator and she said she didn't remember meeting him. And I think that's true.
Oh.
I didn't think she knew who he was. I thought that was part of the freedom.
I wonder.
But maybe, I don't know, maybe that wasn't true, that she didn't remember meeting him in the elevator.
I'm referencing it now against the scene in Somewhere where Stephen Dorff and Benicio del Toro end up in the same elevator in the Chateau Marmont. And it's just like, this happens to him every day. Maybe that's it, that she just didn't know. Maybe she didn't recognize him because he was older and there was a thing there that she doesn't want to say. I don't know. No, I don't know.
No. He gets approached by women all the time, right? People are trying to hit on him. And I thought there was something about her not knowing who he was.
Gives him a liberation. Yeah, I can see that.
Because he was before her time. But I don't know. They don't make it, Sofia Coppola doesn't make it super clear.
No, and Johansson's not playing it with any kind of slyness, right? Like she's not faking that she doesn't know him for our benefit. There's no signaling to the audience at all, in any of these interactions, which I think is great. There's no sense that the movie is letting us in on the secret. We're just there because the camera's there. Like we're not a participant. The film is like there are movies that invite us in a way that Lost in Translation just isn't interested in doing.
No, and the ending is the perfect example of that, right? That we don't get to hear what he says.
It's his email. I'm sure of it. If they haven't, bigbob@hotmail.com or something. He's just making sure they can still connect. I don't know. I don't want to know, honestly, to be absolutely true to the film. I believe very much that the movie tells us everything we need, and it's up to us to fill in the blanks, but I also don't want to know what he says. And I love the fact that people are still obsessed with that. It's I just did my basic Wikipedia research to make sure I had everything lined up properly before we started talking. And the first thing that comes up on Google when you enter the film's title is, what does he say? It's like, you'll never know.
Of course, I Googled it and went down the rabbit hole. And then there is an answer now.
Really?
But it was, and I won't tell you, but it was an improv. It was improvised. And it's not very, it doesn't mean much really what he said. So I think in a similar way to with the swearing jar, actually, the ending is what you want the ending to be. That I know what the ending is for me, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be your perception of it. And so I thought Lost in Translation did the same thing. It doesn't really matter what he said, because I never ever thought of it as they're going to continue. I thought of it as a goodbye with Lost in Translation. I definitely thought it was a goodbye. And it was just, he wanted a proper goodbye because she didn't look back at him. And I didn't think it was a continuation, that they would see each other again or be in contact anymore.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to tell you about the latest Shiny Things newsletter, my twice-weekly dispatch about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming thing. Last week, I wrote about Universal's 40th anniversary edition of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and Elevation's 4K discs of A24's folk horror trinity, The Witch, Hereditary, and Midsommar. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io. If you do it by noon on Wednesday, you can still get in on this week's giveaway. Did you miss me writing about stuff? So did I. Come check it out. There's a world where there's like a before sunrise, before sunset, before midnight thing to their relationship where they're never a couple, but they just keep running into each other at various things. And we can track Charlotte's development as an artist based on Bob finding her. Because they're inevitably going to be, I think, anyway, this is my personal canon, is that they're going to run into each other again because that's just how their world works. And eventually she'll either be married to someone else who's actually paying attention to her, and she'll be the artist doing the tour and Bob will be there. And it would be, I mean, in my head, it's never in Hollywood. It's always somewhere else. It's a film festival here and an art gallery opening there. And they just keep connecting, but they never try. And then I realize it's a version of the Fletch-Moxie relationship from the Fletch books, which I would have read in the 80s. So the running gag in these, in the Fletch books was that Fletch has this incredible supermodel girlfriend. It was all very stylized and very 80s. And everybody's incredibly young and beautiful. And Fletch and Moxie run into each other constantly, and they always pretend they don't know each other. And that's the defining factor of their relationship, is that they never plan it, but whenever they're in the same place, they just strike up a new relationship. And I could sort of see that here, even though I'm imposing a completely different narrative onto the film at this point by having that. But it just feels like we're seeing the first encounter of this life-changing relationship, which will, even if they never see each other again, will continue to influence them.
Yes, I believe that. I don't think my take on it would be that they never see each other again, that this is it, that this is the one time, and it does affect both of them. But, you know, if I were to create my own narrative, I would say they meet, this happens, they think about each other all the time. They, in the world of Facebook or something like that, they would look each other up. They would be curious about each other. But if they were to meet again, it wouldn't be the same. And I've had that before as well. I had a very similar thing happen to me, and I never realized until I watched the movie again that I actually had this. It was very similar. And we met up again one time. And I think it was so disappointing because, for me anyway, I wasn't the best version of myself this time. Okay. I was like, oh my God, he's going to think I'm not funny. He thought I was so funny the first time. And he's going to think I'm a loser, or, you know, it wasn't the same. And I'm glad it wasn't the same, because it would have exploded 2 lives, more than 2 lives, 10 lives. And it wasn't that kind of connection. It was just one of those connections that you have in your life. It changes everything. Never physical, never any lines crossed at all. But it was, I remember every moment of it.
Yeah, I've been in that situation too, I guess. There was one time, but I think I'm flattering myself when I remember it, because it was years and years ago. And it was this conversation with somebody at a film festival, because that's the only time you meet new people, where it's just like, oh, this is the person who's going to blow up my relationship if I'm not careful. And it didn't happen, and I have no idea if she was even attracted to me at all, but it was just one of those conversations that goes on way too long for what it is.
Yeah.
And then you gradually realize this is a really weird place that I'm doing all of this work myself. Like, I'm investing it all in myself, and I have absolutely no idea. But it was just one of those things where you see it in the rear view and you realize just how much of yourself you've invested without even thinking about it. Yeah. And it's just because somebody reacted the right way to one thing, or that you reacted the right way to the thing that they did. And it snowballs. Yeah. And it's, I'm not finding myself contemplating an affair or anything like that, but all of a sudden it's just like, wow, this feels great. This feels like a conversation that I should be having every day, all the time. And that's how Absolutely. It starts.
And it's so dangerous, because it happens. It hasn't happened to me when I was in a relationship. It hasn't happened very much when I'm in relationships, but it happens a lot when they're in relationships. And it is that thing of, this person would change my life. This person we just have something that is incredibly unique, and clearly not, because it keeps happening.
Exactly. Right. Because it's just the newness.
It's obviously more about yourself. It's more about the way that they make you feel about yourself. And it's not a sexual thing, but you know that it could be. And it's I don't know, that's some therapy shit there.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. And the age gap in the film allows it not to be a thing. Like, it just, these characters are too smart. These people are too mature to try even to flirt. Like, that's just not what they're doing. They're just meeting on a level of intellectual flirtation.
I disagree.
Oh, yeah?
I disagree. And I noticed that more this time too. I mean, he is dying to touch her all the time. There, you know, the moment where he touches her toe. Did you notice that? He's holding onto her toe. They're lying on the bed together and he's got his hand on her toe. And every moment, every touch in the film is so specific and so charged. There's one part where he puts her to bed and the only skin showing is just on her shoulder, and he touches that. He doesn't touch her here. He touches her there when he says, you know, good night. And see, I think he would sleep with her. I think that they both would have if somebody had crossed the line. Unfortunately, they were both too smart to do that. But I think that it was so close. And the kiss, right? They do kiss.
Yeah, it's funny. It feels like role playing to me. Like, it feels like neither of them is intent on going through with it. There's just, maybe it's just the way that I'm perceiving Murray's performance now, where he's just sort of allowing us to luxuriate in Scarlett Johansson as well. The way he gives back, the way he's always watching and seeing her and looking.
Yeah.
And I don't read desire. I just read affection, like fondness. And maybe some part of my brain is just shutting. Well, yeah,
right? I think they fall in love, whatever it means. I think, you know, sex would cheapen it. He has sex with the singer who he doesn't have any respect for. And I think there is an element of that sex would cheapen it. And also, I think he doesn't want to be creepy.
Yeah. Right? I think that's the thing that's in his performance too, right? Like, it keeps us from worrying that he's going to cross the line. And maybe that's it. It just diffuses the tension of it.
Yeah. When he's carrying her, you don't think, oh God, this is going to turn into promising young woman, right?
Yeah.
You just trust him. He's got that sort of dad quality to him. But I do think that it's very sexually charged. I really did feel that. And I don't know that I definitely don't think age prevents that, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. The film is, I mean, it's absolutely true that the movie sees her as a sexual object. I mean, the opening shot alone is just sort of a, hey, yep, she's, you know, this is what we would market as a hot girl image. It's just, you know, it's just a translucent panty shot. I
didn't understand that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure why it was there either, but I think it's supposed to be there now to demonstrate that she could, if she wanted to, that her attractiveness is enough in terms of the currency of this world that she could sleep with anybody she wants, get whatever she wants. And it's just she's not that person. But we're introduced to her as an object before we get to know her as a human. And it's the same thing that Coppola does in The Virgin Suicides, right? Because she keeps the sisters distant and then brings us in. So we see them through the gaze of the young men who knew them but couldn't save them. And that whole savior thing becomes the defining factor of that narrative. This isn't that, but this is the same way of saying, look, I know what people see when they look at young women. Now I'm going to show you what's inside.
So you think that she's almost showing her how he sees her?
Or how he could.
How he could.
Like, this is how she exists in the world that she lives in, but she refuses to
use
it to her advantage.
In the elevator, that's probably what he
probably
sees, right?
And maybe she doesn't pay attention to it because she's used to being looked at, so she doesn't even clock who she's being looked at by.
Yeah.
That could work. Okay. I accept this. I accept this theory.
Okay, I like our theory. My sister is honestly one of the most beautiful human beings in every way, but physically ridiculous. And I realized at a certain point, I realized more so when I lived with her, the way the world is so different. Her experience of the world is so different. And it's not better. It's just, she has to have a harder, like she always had to be a little bit tougher than the rest of it. She had to be ruder to people because otherwise she would never be able to get anywhere. Like literally physically, she wouldn't be able to get to the store.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She had to be a little ruder, and she had to work almost harder, which is not what you would expect. But I don't think people saw her and thought, you must be very smart. You know, I think she had to work harder, and it's yeah. So I thought about this. I thought about her watching this film this time too.
Yeah, that weird presumption that because you look a certain way, you don't have to try in other things. Like you don't have to achieve anything else.
Yeah.
Which I've never fully understood. But yeah, I've been in enough spaces with genuinely famous people to realize that I disappear. And it's not necessarily looks, right? Like it's charisma or fame or reputation.
Mm-hmm. It is something you can feel, I think, when you watch people on stage or when you see a film and you just think, oh my God, they have it. They have whatever that is. It's incredible. I have two I think funny stories to tell you. So this was another thing the film made me think of. So when I saw it the first time, I hadn't done Stargate yet. And Stargate has a huge fan base, international, massive fan base. And my brother was one of the leads, right? So he's had a huge career anyway, but he gets recognized all the time. But I played his sister on the show. And so that is the only real taste of fame I've ever had. And all it is when I'm at a Stargate convention, right? So if I'm in the real world, I think maybe once ever I had someone say, hey, you're David Hewlett's sister. It still wasn't my name, but they recognized me. I think it happened once. But at these Stargate conventions, I am legitimately famous. And it's so weird because the whole rest of my life, it's not true.
Yeah.
But at these conventions, it's like everything I say is funny. And every answer I give is the right answer. And they just give you so much love and they're so supportive. And it's wild, right? It's what you can't go to the bathroom by yourself. Someone has to follow you. Someone has to take you. And everyone should experience this at some point in their life where they feel this famous, you know? And it is not the case at even other sci-fi conventions where there are people from all different shows. No one knows who I am, but at a Stargate convention, I'm famous. And that feeling of fame, watching it this time, I related to that, right? Where you're like certain people who saw Bill Murray in this movie know exactly who he is, and he's on the side of the bus and all that. And then some people don't have a clue, I think.
Yeah. I mean, half the people in the bar probably, wouldn't know him. And maybe also, when he picks up the microphone, maybe when he starts to sing.
I did think maybe he was more famous in Japan. I wondered that too, because I don't think he did those commercials back home. So is he just an actor from the past at home, but in Japan, he's super, super, super famous, you know?
Right. Well, that's like Stallone and Schwarzenegger doing those ads too. I think that's where it came from, the idea that the action stars would be. And Bruce Willis must have done one too, actually, now that I think about it.
So I had this feeling of fame that stuck with me just a little tiny bit, where you're like, or Twitter or whatever. You're like, sure, oh, I've got, and it's a nice feeling, it gives you a little boost. So I have two stories. One of them was I went to a ramen noodle restaurant, and I go in, I'm by myself, and I order a big bowl of noodles and I eat everything. And then at the end, the guy comes over to give me the bill, and he goes, can I please, can we take your picture and put it on the wall? And I was like, oh my God. Oh, look at me. So I get up and he starts to take the picture, and I realize It's because no one has ever finished this particular dish in one sitting. And there's a wall of fame for people who finished specific was that I ate so much. That's why I had no idea about this. So that was a good little reminder. And then the other one was I ran a 10K race. And as I'm crossing the finish line, they're like, Kate Hewlett. And I did this waving thing. And then I realized they were saying everyone's name as they crossed the line. It's just like those moments, they keep you humble.
No, you deserve celebration for both of those accomplishments.
Oh my God. Thank you. And one facilitated the other. So, God.
The one thing I did want to ask about or point to, I suppose, is that Lost in Translation and The Swearing Jar, I was going to say they don't have a lot in common. When people pick their movies, I do the thing where it's like, oh, but what about, how does this connect to that? And what I'm impressed with, and what you've alluded to about The Swearing Jar, is that it is a film that obfuscates in a completely different manner. Like Lost in Translation actively hides things from us. The Swearing Jar just puts them on a different space and eventually knits everything together in a way that is enigmatic, but also fairly clear. Like by the end of the movie, we know the whys and the hows, and maybe we don't know exactly when certain things were chosen or certain decisions were made, but the shuffling of time in the course of the film is, I'm assuming, not what was possible on stage.
No, it was.
And you did the same thing?
I did. Yeah. We did the Fringe, then we did the New York Fringe. Then it was produced professionally in Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. And that's it for Canada. Wow. I'm not a darling of the theater. I am not one of the loved playwrights here. I think everyone always felt like my writing sounded too much like film and TV. So I was like, okay.
Naturalistic.
I don't know.
That's so strange.
I mean, I developed it through the Tarragon Playwrights Unit. They were incredible, very supportive, but it was never produced at the Tarragon.
Interesting. I mean, I would think now there's probably likely to be more demand for it, right? Now that the film is out there.
I really hope so. I would love to have it done in Ontario. I'm also not very good about going out to people and saying, will you do this play? So my friend Jessica Carmichael is a director, incredible director, theater director. And I'm trying to get her to take it to different places with me, so that we can find a place to do it. I would love to do it at Theatre Aquarius here in Hamilton, actually, too.
Oh, yeah. But, withholding as a dramatic device is really interesting. And Lost in Translation builds an entire world on it. And The Swearing Jar, it's not like that exactly. It's not doing the same thing, but it is about making us wonder what the bigger picture is.
So for me, the sort of withholding, I guess, that I do narratively is so that we are on the journey with her and we are seeing her the way she sees herself. So she feels like she's, being disloyal and all of these things. I just felt that it was impossible to tell this story any other way. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the play is the same because it's actually, it ended up being very similar. The screenplay and the play are actually very similar because I had all these other characters I had added, but they sort of got removed again. So by the director.
That's interesting.
Yeah. She kind of cut it back down. So it's really, really Carrie's story,
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I know Lindsay a little. She was one of the very first guests on the podcast, actually. She, back when Wet Bum came out.
What did she choose?
She chose Lynn Ramsey's Ratcatcher. Episode 9, all the way back.
Okay, I don't know what that is. I don't know.
It's terrific. It's like an almost Ken Loachian neorealistic portrait of a troubled kid in Scotland. It was her first feature. It's remarkably immediate and painful. There's a Criterion edition of it. It's tremendous.
Okay. I'm making a little list of all the things I need to see.
Sure. And not at all like Wet Bum or The Swearing Jar. Lindsay seems to be drawn towards, how can I describe it? Suburban vulnerable stories, which sounds reductive, but it is like a certain time and a place and a space in people's lives where they're caught between who they are and who they were going to be. which I guess is also lost in translation, right? I mean, at least from Charlotte's point of view.
I was going to text her and see if this was one of her favorite movies, actually, because I realized watching it how much of that style I felt she brought to Swearing Jar. And I don't know if, like, maybe Sofia Coppola is one of her
influences.
I don't know. Or influences. I don't know. Maybe not. I'm curious.
I wonder. I'm thinking about both films, both Wet Bum and The Swearing Jar, and there's definitely an appreciation for people living in spaces, like just existing with each other and feeling each other out. Wet Bum is really lost in translation-y too, actually, because it's the younger girl and the older man.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, now I want to ask her too. Let me know what she says.
I can do it now. She's pretty good at, she's like one of those people who texts instantly. So I sent to Lindsay, is Lost in Translation one of your faves or no? Very strange question out of the blue.
Yeah.
She said, I mean, I like it. One of my faves. There was a time. Why?
Which is appropriately elliptical.
Yeah. I'm going to write later. How mysterious is that?
She'll listen to this and suddenly realize the whole context.
Yeah. It'll all make sense. She's going to be texting me now. What the hell's going on?
We sort of covered it, but obliquely. The ending of the podcast is usually me trying to find out if there is something that's specifically drawn from the thing. So was there something from Lost in Translation that you pulled out to work with The Swearing Jar, or was it just more of a free-floating influence?
I think Lost in Translation influenced me without me realizing it. And coming back to it now, I think a lot of the themes are things that I am drawn to, loneliness, connection. What was that? I wrote down a few things because that sense of how did I get here? Dreams versus reality, connection, aging, all of these things. I realized that it did have quite an influence, even though I used so much more dialogue than they did in this movie. Yeah. And I guess the being drawn to someone when you can't be with them, I guess, an unattainable love, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's so good at evoking longing.
Yes.
In almost every form, not just for another person to see you, but for a place that get you, for a place to be comfortable in, to feel like you belong somewhere, anywhere. It's that thing that Coppola does so well as a filmmaker too, because so many of her movies are about people who just don't feel comfortable where they are.
Yes.
Even though they should have, like, on the outside, they should be right at home, or they should have everything, or they should have enough money or resources to get the things that they want that make them feel comfortable. And it's just this essential human quality of, what am I doing here?
Yeah. And somehow getting the answer from this other person, getting what you need from this other person you don't even know, and who feels, so cheesy, but who feels like home, right?
Yeah.
It's it's a brilliant movie. Still holds up.
Yeah, I'm just so weirded out by the fact that now I'm just identifying so much with the Bob Harris character, just because we're roughly the same age now.
And I'm 45, so I think he's supposed to be 50 in the film, or somewhere around there. I mean, they keep saying middle age, so maybe younger than 50. I don't know.
I mean, who knows what middle age means anymore? I'm 54. So
Jesus, it gets more ridiculous every time.
Exactly. It's preposterous. I'm youthful. I'm not youthful. My thanks to Kate Hewlett. And you should check out The Swearing Jar now that it's available on VOD in the US and opening theatrically in Toronto and Vancouver, November 2nd and 9th, respectively. Thanks also to Ali Lemaire-Shedden. She knows what she did. You can find Kate on Twitter at Kate Hewlett, all one word, and you can find Lost in Translation on Blu-ray and DVD from Universal Studios Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on Crave and Starz in Canada and Showtime and DirecTV in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the podcast is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 45 of which, including Swearing Jar director Lindsay Mackay's episode on Ratcatcher, aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next week.